AITA for ruining Christmas for my in-laws and blowing up their relationship with my husband, because I told the truth possibly from ego? Back in the summer, during one of those long and casual conversations with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, well, technically my husband's stepdad, Christmas came up. They mentioned how sad it made them that we had never spent Christmas together as a family. It wasn't a passing comment either, it was clear this was something they had been holding on to for a while. Now, a bit of context here. My husband and I have 3 young kids, 2 very energetic dogs, and a cat who thinks she runs the house. We live in a different province from them, and while we do make an effort to see each other during the warmer months, we're talking about a 19-hour drive between us. Not only is it a logistical nightmare in the winter with the unpredictable and often extreme weather in both our regions, but honestly, it's just unsafe. We've always prioritized staying put in the colder months, and so far, they've never made the trip to us during the holidays either. Where we live, my mother-in-law has a large extended family, at least a dozen other relatives they could spend Christmas with. On the other hand, where they live, it's just the 2 of them and my 17-year-old sister-in-law. She's my husband's half-sister, and since she's still in high school, her holidays are more predictable, but her availability also revolves around school schedules. During that summer conversation, I tried to find a solution that worked for everyone. I told them, look, instead of us trying to pack up 3 kids, kennel the dogs and the cat, and pay for all 5 of us to fly out there, how about this? I'll cover the cost of flying the 3 of you here instead. It seemed like the most reasonable solution. Flying with 1 teenager is definitely easier than wrangling 3 small children through airports, not to mention the added bonus of them getting to see the rest of their extended family here. They seemed genuinely happy with this suggestion. My mother-in-law even said it sounded perfect, so I told her to talk to my father-in-law about their schedules and figure out the dates. At the time, I felt pretty optimistic. I told them to look into booking the time off work and let me know as soon as possible, emphasizing how important it was to lock in the dates early. Since their town is pretty small, flights fill up quickly, especially around the holidays. Over the next few months, I kept reminding them, gently at first. They both work shift jobs, and their schedules don't always align, which I understand can be tricky. But I made it clear that I couldn't book anything until they confirmed their dates. Every time I brought it up, my mother-in-law would say something like, oh, we're still figuring it out, or, I'll talk to him this week. Each time, I reiterated that flights were limited and we needed to act soon. By the end of November, I was starting to feel the pressure. I gave her one last call and laid it all out. Look, I said, this is the last time I'm going to ask. Flights are booking up fast, and if you want to make this happen, I need you to figure out the dates and let me know ASAP. She promised to get back to me, and I decided that was the end of it on my part. I wasn't going to keep chasing them. December rolled around, and I hadn't heard anything. By this point, I had mentally moved on. We were already making plans for a cozy Christmas at home, just the 5 of us. Then, on December 15th, yes, a mere 10 days before Christmas, she called me. I have the dates, she said, almost triumphantly, as if she had just solved a major mystery. I sat down at my computer while we were still on the phone and pulled up the airline website. I wasn't optimistic, and unfortunately, I was right. The flights were completely booked. Not a single seat available. I told her the bad news, and there was this long, awkward pause on the other end of the line. Finally, I offered an alternative. How about we plan for you to come in the new year? We can do a late Christmas celebration, and it'll still be nice. Her response. It's not the same, though. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just said, that's a shame, and we ended the call shortly after. Now, I know I'm not in the wrong here. I went out of my way to offer a solution that worked for everyone. I even offered to pay for their flights, which is no small expense. But here's where the fallout started. Since that phone call, my mother-in-law has been distant. She's not outright rude, but there's definitely a chill in her tone when we talk. My husband's stepdad hasn't said anything directly to me, but I can sense the tension through him as well. And my sister-in-law? Well, she's a teenager, so she's mostly indifferent, but even she seems a little disappointed. I've heard through the grapevine, because of course, family gossip travels fast, that my mother-in-law is telling people how heartbroken she is that we're not spending Christmas together. She's conveniently leaving out the part where they dragged their feet for months and waited until mid-December to confirm their plans. I'll admit, part of me feels a little guilty. Not because I think I did anything wrong, but because I hate seeing people I care about upset. At the same time, I'm frustrated. I gave them so many chances to make this work, and they just didn't prioritize it. Now they're upset, and somehow, I feel like I'm the one being blamed. If they want to come in the new year, the offer still stands. But I'm not going to let their disappointment ruin our Christmas. If anything, this whole situation has reminded me to set boundaries and stick to them. That's where I'm at. Am I the bad guy here? I don't think so. But the fallout from this has left me questioning how much effort I should be putting into these relationships moving forward. Update 1. Yesterday was one of those days where you can feel the storm brewing even before it hits. I had gone out to run some errands, just the usual pre-holiday stuff, picking up some last-minute stocking stuffers for the kids, grabbing a few extra groceries since we're hosting Christmas at home, and making sure we had enough treats for the pets to keep them busy while the chaos of presents unfolds. It was supposed to be a straightforward day, but of course, life had other plans. As I was browsing through a rack of scarves, I bumped into my husband's cousin. He's the kind of guy who's friendly but not someone I would expect to run into often. We exchanged pleasantries, but before I could find an excuse to move on, he brought up the subject I had been actively trying to avoid, my in-laws. He started talking about how unfortunate it was that the flights didn't work out for them, how they had been really looking forward to Christmas with us, and how sad they were to be spending the holiday alone yet again. Now, at first, I just nodded along and agreed. Yeah, it really is a shame, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. But then he went on, mentioning how he'd heard from the family that this was such a mess because I had dropped the ball. That I hadn't followed through on my promise to make the arrangements, and that my in-laws were devastated because of me. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I've always prided myself on keeping my cool, but hearing that they were pinning this mess on me after everything I had done. That was too much. I couldn't just smile and nod anymore. I calmly but firmly told him the real story, how this had been in the works since June, how I had spent months reminding them to figure out their schedules, how I had gone out of my way to offer to pay for their flights and make everything as easy as possible for them. I told him that all they had to do, literally all they had to do, was give me the dates. And when they finally did, it was so late in the game that the flights were completely booked. I wasn't rude about it, but I definitely didn't sugarcoat anything. I was annoyed, and it showed. I didn't think much of it after we parted ways. Honestly, it felt good to vent. But of course, in a family like this, no good deed, or venting session, goes unpunished. What I didn't account for was how quickly my words would spread. By the time I got home and was unpacking the groceries, the dominoes were already starting to fall. Apparently, the cousin went straight to his parents and relayed everything I said. And naturally, his mom, my mother-in-law's sister, called my mother-in-law to fill her in. It didn't take long before my phone started blowing up with notifications, but I ignored them. I should have known better. When my mother-in-law couldn't reach me, she went straight to my husband. My husband told me later how the conversation unfolded, and honestly, I'm still reeling. She called him in a full-on rage, yelling about how I was bad-mouthing her to the family, how I was making her out to be irresponsible, and how I had ruined their Christmas. She was going on and on about how unfair it was and how I was turning everyone against her. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I had been deliberately unkind, twisting the situation to make her look bad. But here's the thing about my husband, he has spent his entire life enduring her guilt trips and manipulation, and he is done playing that game. He told her exactly how he felt. He told her he never wanted to spend Christmas with them anyway, that they should be grateful I even tried to make it happen, and that the only reason they had any relationship with us at all was because of me. He told her I had been bending over backward for years to compensate for her shortcomings, and instead of being thankful, she had sabotaged the whole thing. He didn't hold back, and when he dropped the line about her being as useless as a paper hammer, he hung up. And just like that, the whole family exploded. The fallout has been intense. My mother-in-law is furious, of course. She's been calling everyone in the family, spinning the story to make herself look like the victim. Her sister is backing her up, which isn't surprising, they've always had that kind of codependent dynamic. Meanwhile, my husband's cousin feels caught in the middle, but I don't blame him. If I were in his shoes, I probably would have done the same thing. He didn't say anything malicious, he just passed along what he heard. Now the family is divided into factions. There are those who are siding with my mother-in-law, believing her version of events, and those who are siding with us, understanding that we did everything we could to make this work. And in the middle of all of this chaos, I can't help but feel like I set the whole thing in motion. If I had just kept my mouth shut and taken the blame, none of this would have happened. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to shoulder all the blame here. My mother-in-law has a long history of being flaky and non-committal. This isn't the first time her lack of follow-through has caused problems, and it probably won't be the last. My husband thinks her behavior is rooted in the fact that, deep down, she just doesn't care. He even suggested that she never really wanted to come in the first place and sabotaged it on purpose. That theory stings, but I can't entirely dismiss it. The most heartbreaking part of all of this is how it's affected my husband. He was no contact with his mom when we met, and for good reason. His childhood was traumatic, marked by neglect and emotional abuse. After we got married, he decided to give her another chance because she seemed to have changed. She was a good mom to my sister-in-law and seemed to have found stability in her marriage. But even then, he kept her at arm's length. He let me handle most of the communication and planning, and while he was happy for our kids to have a relationship with her, he was never fully invested in rebuilding their bond. Now, though, he's done. Completely done. He told me he doesn't regret reconnecting because it gave our kids a chance to know their grandmother, but he also feels like this situation has confirmed everything he always knew deep down. She hasn't really changed, not in the ways that matter most. And while he seems relieved to cut ties, I can tell it's brought back a lot of old feelings he thought he had moved past. There's a sadness in him now, a kind of quiet grief for the mother he never had and will never have. As for me, I feel terrible. I didn't mean to ignite this firestorm. I was frustrated and vented to the wrong person, and now the whole family is in turmoil. Part of me wonders if I should have just swallowed my pride and let them blame me. Maybe it would have been easier than dealing with all of this. But another part of me knows that the truth was bound to come out eventually. My mother-in-law's actions, or lack of action, were always going to catch up with her. So here we are, days before Christmas, sitting in the middle of a family implosion I never intended to cause. Am I the bad guy for letting my frustration slip out? Maybe. But at the same time, I think everyone is just seeing the cracks in a relationship that was never as solid as it seemed. And maybe, just maybe, this needed to happen. I can understand why, from my previous post, people might assume I was the one who pushed for my husband to reconnect with his mother and her family. But I need to make something crystal clear, that was never the case. I don't have, nor have I ever had, any personal investment in maintaining a relationship with my mother-in-law or her husband. In fact, I'd go so far as to say my feelings for her land squarely in the realm of disdain. The driving force behind the reconnection wasn't me, it was his sister. My husband has always wanted a relationship with his half-sister since the day she was born. She's 17 now, but back when she was just a little girl, he had this deep desire to be a part of her life. It was complicated because she was a minor, and realistically, the only way to have consistent access to her was to establish some sort of relationship with their mother. When we got married, my husband decided to reach out to his mother for the sake of building that bridge to his sister. He wasn't under any illusions about their history or who his mother is as a person. He's done years of counseling and therapy to process his childhood trauma, the neglect, the emotional abuse, the pain, the resentment, and the anger. His father, the primary source of his trauma, is no longer in his life, and he has no interest in rekindling that connection. But his sister? She was different. She was his one tie to the family he wanted to salvage, the person who gave him a reason to try. As for me, I've always supported him in the ways he needed. I didn't push for the relationship with his mother, but I stepped into the role of the middleman when it became clear that interacting with her was a necessary evil to keep that connection with his sister alive. I handled most of the communication, planned visits, sent cards and gifts, and made sure things stayed amicable. It was a lot of work, and I won't lie, there were times when it felt thankless and exhausting. But I did it because it mattered to him. It was never about her, it was about giving him access to the only person in his family he genuinely cared about. The thing is, this wasn't some martyr-like sacrifice on my part. My husband and I have had countless conversations over the years about his comfort level with all of this. Every step of the way, I've checked in with him to make sure he was okay with the boundaries we had in place and the effort we were putting in. He was fine with the arrangement because it allowed him to have a relationship with his sister while keeping his mother at arm's length. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, for a time. Now, though, everything has fallen apart. The fallout from this Christmas debacle has spiraled in ways I never saw coming. My sister-in-law is furious. She refuses to speak to either of us, which breaks my husband's heart. He doesn't blame me outright, but I know he's devastated that this might have been the death blow to their relationship. He has spent years carefully navigating his interactions with his mother to protect his connection with his sister, and now it feels like all of that effort was for nothing. I feel like an asshole for letting my frustration get the better of me. I didn't stop to think about the ripple effect of my words. In that moment, venting to the cousin felt harmless, like a much-needed release after months of bending over backward to accommodate people who couldn't even commit to a simple set of dates. But now, looking at the wreckage it's caused, I can't help but feel like I set this whole implosion in motion. To make matters worse, my husband's aunt and cousin, the ones I vented to, have decided to take a step back from us as well. They informed us that they're no longer comfortable coming to our Christmas Eve gathering, and they've disinvited us from their Christmas Day dinner. I understand their reasoning on some level, but it still stings. We've hosted Christmas Eve for years, and now I'm wondering who else will bail on us because of all this drama. The family is fractured, and I don't know if it will ever fully heal. My husband, for his part, seems strangely relieved. He's told me that cutting ties with his mother is a weight off his shoulders, and while he's heartbroken about the situation with his sister, he feels like he did everything he could. I believe him. He has never been one to shy away from hard work or confrontation when it comes to relationships, and he's certainly put in more effort than anyone could reasonably expect. But there's a sadness in him now that's hard to ignore. It's the kind of sadness that comes from realizing, yet again, that the family you desperately want isn't the family you have. He's been here before, and I know he'll work through it, but it doesn't make it any easier to watch. For me, the fallout is bittersweet. On one hand, I don't have to deal with my mother-in-law anymore, which honestly feels like a relief. I've never had any affection or respect for her, so losing that connection doesn't feel like a loss. On the other hand, I feel responsible for the damage this has caused to my husband's relationship with his sister. He tolerated his mother for years to be closer to his sister, and now it feels like all of that tolerance has gone to waste. As we head into Christmas, I'm trying to focus on making it special for my kids. They're too young to understand the complexities of all this drama, and they don't need to. But I can't help but feel a heavy sense of guilt and sadness hanging over everything. I know I didn't cause all of this single-handedly, but my actions were the catalyst, and that's something I'll have to live with. I guess the question I keep asking myself is this: should I have just kept my mouth shut? Should I have taken the blame and let my in-laws paint me as the villain to keep the peace? Maybe. But then again, maybe the cracks in these relationships were always going to show eventually. Maybe this was inevitable, and all I did was speed up the timeline. I don't know. All I know is that this Christmas will be different from any we've had before, and not in a good way. Update 3. After what felt like weeks of chaos, tension, and heartbreak, something unexpected happened, a breakthrough. It wasn't dramatic or flashy, but rather a small, quiet step in the right direction. A few days ago, my husband's sister reached out to him. It was late at night, and he was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone when the message came through. It wasn't long, just a simple, "Can we talk?" But it was enough to shift the mood in our house. He didn't hesitate to reply, and they ended up talking for hours. She told him how upset she was about everything that had happened, not just about Christmas but the entire family fallout. She admitted that she had been angry at both of us, but mostly because she felt caught in the middle and didn't know how to navigate the situation. My husband listened patiently, reassured her that his frustration was never directed at her, and apologized for the way things had spiraled out of control. For the first time in weeks, they found common ground. He explained his boundaries with their mother and why he felt the need to step back. She didn't completely agree, but she said she understood. She even admitted that their mother had a tendency to play the victim and that, deep down, she knew this wasn't entirely our fault. By the end of the call, they weren't just on speaking terms, they were planning for her to visit us during spring break. That conversation seemed to open the door for more healing. The next morning, my mother-in-law called. My husband and I were both surprised. Her tone was softer, almost apologetic. She didn't outright say she was sorry, but she acknowledged that things had gotten out of hand, and that she didn't want the family to remain fractured. She also mentioned that she missed the kids and wanted to find a way to make things right. We talked about the possibility of a late Christmas celebration in January. My husband made it clear that he wasn't ready to fully repair their relationship, but he agreed to try for the sake of keeping things civil. I stayed mostly quiet during the call, letting him set the tone, but I could tell it was a step in the right direction. Over the next few days, we reached out to other family members to try and mend fences. My husband's cousin, the one I vented to, was surprisingly understanding. He admitted that he felt bad for unintentionally stirring the pot and said he didn't hold anything against us. His family has decided to come to our Christmas Eve gathering after all, which feels like a small victory. As for my mother-in-law, she's still walking on eggshells, but she seems to be making an effort. She's even offered to come visit us in February to make up for missing Christmas, which feels like a significant gesture considering how things started. While I'm cautiously optimistic, I know this isn't a fairy tale ending. There's still a lot of work to do, and I'm not sure the relationships will ever fully recover. But for the first time in weeks, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Christmas is just around the corner, and while it won't be the big family celebration anyone envisioned, I think it'll still be special. My husband and I have decided to focus on creating joyful memories with our kids, and the rest will fall into place in time.